be your host for today. Well, this is the 5th day of our National Science Week, an annual meeting of scientists and thousands of visitors jointly organized by the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center and the Ministry of Education, Tertiary Education, Science and Technology of the Republic of Mauritius. Our GSC has not been spared of the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. Actually, running an online science week was not our preferred choice. However, like all science centers, we are compelled to review, renew, and reshape our strategies and programs. Most importantly, we tapped onto this opportunity to host this international forum to reflect on an important question. Has there been a paradigm shift in science communication due to COVID-19? So please, as we go along, feel free to type in your suggestions and questions in the question and answer box as we go through. So before diving deep into the topic, let me invite Dr. Jayanti Nuga, the chairperson of the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center, for her welcome address. Dr. Nuga, please. Dr. Nuga, can you please unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Good morning and good afternoon to you all. As appropriate, I know that we are here dealing with experts from different parts of the world, and in some places it's morning and in other places it's good afternoon. So as chairperson of the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center, I have the pleasure to welcome all our international experts who are here in this important forum organized by the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center. And as you all know, you have been told probably before, it is the only science center in Mauritius. And I hope many of you know about Mauritius, which you can hardly see on the map. It's just a small dot. And sometimes people would wonder how the aeroplane can land on this small dot like that. Yeah, and it was really a pleasure to have also here the NCSM, who has been behind the creation of this center, and also the High Commission, the Indian government, who has helped us in having this center in order to promote scientific literacy in Mauritius. This event is the first for a science center in a small island state like us, and COVID-19 has really revealed all our vulnerabilities. And this week we held the National Science Week 100% online. We are compelled to, as Bamini said, to adapt, readapt, and review all our strategies to meet the new challenges of the pandemic. We're doing our best to reach the public and our students so as to build a sustainable future for them. And this year, as our budget has been squeezed, we have to really restrict all our activities. And we hope that next year we'll be able to do more when the pandemic is gone. Our schools are closed and the visits to the center are not possible due to the restrictions of COVID-19. We have to stick to the sanitary protocol. Yet 2 years into this pandemic, Rajiv Gandhi Science Center is still thriving by making use of the virtual mode, social media, online webinars, quiz games, and many other activities. I would like to congratulate the dynamic Rajiv Gandhi Science Center staff under the skillful leadership of Dr. Aman Kumar Mulu for making all these events possible. And I hope that it will be a real success, because the feedback so far we have obtained has shown that many of those who have attended this National Science Week have said a lot of good things about it. So I thank all the world experts in science communication from the different countries for sharing their experiences, and we are looking forward to further collaboration. Thank you all for your attention. I wish you all the best in this forum.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nuga. We will get the opportunity to learn more about the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center as we move along. And today, our team of panelists comprise 8 experts from 6 countries, including Mauritius, South Africa, USA, UK, India, and Australia. And our panelists will be sharing their experiences of strategic planning amidst the crisis faced by science centers. And we will also take cognizance of how educational programs have been reshaped to reach out to a wider number of students and to the community. Actually, a UNESCO report on museums' reactions to the pandemic was published in April 2021, and it reveals that impacts such as drastic budget cuts, decreased visitor attendance, and staff layoffs were some of the consequences of the pandemic. And another highlight is that the digital divide across different countries is becoming more and more visible. I am honored to welcome Mr. Walter Stavelos for his presentation. And let me quickly give a brief introduction of Mr. Walter, who has gathered years of experience as the first executive director of EXCITE, which is the European Association of Science Centers. And he was also the director of international relations at the ASTC, Association of Science and Technology Centers. And now he has started multiple initiatives to encourage museums and science centers in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. He's a specialist in public engagement with science and recently created the museumexpert.org to support museum professionals who are out of work due to COVID. Mr. Walter, it's yours.
Thank you so much for this kind introduction, and so very happy to be with all of you here and the public in Mauritius, online, and all the colleagues that I've known for so many years. So thanks for inviting me. I'm going to share my screen, I guess. So you mentioned in your introduction the report of UNESCO, and let me also start with that for a couple of seconds, because you mentioned the very, very important, of course, impacts that COVID has had on museums, and very obvious ones because of the closing of the museums that has led to the reduced income at the door, at least, but also some cuts from other sources that they had as one of the major things that happened. And so very many of them will still suffer from that for a long period of time, depending, of course, of where they are in the world. There is a very strong difference in funding mechanisms between Europe and the United States, for example. I will focus on the US in my presentation, but there hundreds of museums have been, if not, hundreds of museums have been affected, and 10,000s of people and professionals have been losing their jobs, and many will not find them back. The other findings from UNESCO was, of course, that the immediate reaction of the museums has been to transfer their activities in online education, and that was possible because most of them had already done investments in these tools, and they have adapted them for other uses and online uses only, with many benefits in some cases, because what many discovered is that these online activities allowed them to reach new audiences, and sometimes in dramatic ways. I know, for example, that the University in Mexico City started online programs and had in a couple of months 90 million visitors in Latin America on their websites, which is a huge number, and it's still going on today. But not only in terms of numbers, also in terms of age groups. I know of, and some will probably speak about that, that going online for some institutions that allow to reach audiences that they usually don't use, in particular with older teenagers that are very difficult publics to reach in traditional times. But another thing that UNESCO showed was that there is become an awareness of inequalities that were existing, and you mentioned that before. There is the digital gap, that is being discovered or rediscovered or increased even because of the pandemic. In the poorest communities in the world, they have also been the hardest hit by the pandemic, and these are all the ones that are maybe not accessible through online activities. And then what UNESCO mentioned as well is that at the same time as we had the pandemic in the United States, there is the Black Lives Movement that have been expanding because of the murder of George Floyd, and that has created a new awareness for the science centers, certainly in the US, about their place in society and the role that they have to play. So equity and social justice has become the center and front in the new vision and mission for museums more than it has ever been before. I would say that they may have spoken about it, but not realized the impact and the real reality of that. And as a result, UNESCO mentioned that because of this new vision that museums may have about the inequalities that they discover and all of that, that I mentioned before, science museums have become privileged partners to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. You may know that, and these are a number of examples from concrete actions that science centers have been taken. They used makerspaces to build masks and equipment for essential workers. They helped with food distribution. They offered computer spaces and Wi-Fi connections for kids from underserved communities to access online schooling. They transformed in test and vaccination centers. In the US, there is a strong campaign now where more than 50 museums in the US are to do a campaigning in favor of vaccination. You know that still a large part of the population doesn't want to be vaccinated. Well, museums step up to lobby for vaccination. That goes beyond the science of vaccination, but it's more about social responsibility. And so they have also started now, and as I mentioned earlier, to reflect on inclusive strategy in a more deep way. I think that at the same time, a certain number of concerns for science centers and museums came up, and the trust in science is one of them. And in the beginning, we all thought that this was an amazing period of time because the creation of the vaccine in such a short period of time has created a new support from the population for science and seeing how science can actually address real issues in a short period of time when they work together. But this has been now a little bit diffused because of ideological conflicts that exist, and also because of probably the confusing messaging from the scientific community and the leaders. And whether we want this or not, the reality is that we have seen changes in the way that it's been communicated about what the vaccine could do. Do you have to have 1, 2, now 3? Maybe they are not effective as long as they have before. And from the beginning, there has been too much of expectations about the vaccine is going to solve everything. And now we see that that's not necessarily the case. And so there is still a little bit of conflict about that. And so we might have to deal with that in the future when we have to speak about the way that science, what science can do, rather focusing on how the process of science is going, so that people understand that the science is progressing with steps and tests and mistakes and retesting and all of that we know, and adaptation, and it's not a straight line, and it's something that we have to make sure the public understands, which is not necessarily the case today. And so I'm going to skip this now. How does that translate into a new vision for science centers and museums? Well, let me focus on one aspect of it. You mentioned that I created Museum Expert.org to help museum staffers out of work to rebuild their careers. And so things that we have found by discussing webinars and speaking with a number of CEOs all over the world. And it's unfortunate, but in the US in particular, that 10,000 of people who have lost their work, the institution will not rehire people that they have laid off. And they are looking for, and there are two reasons for that. And the first is, of course, the economic reason. because there have been budget cuts, and there are not necessarily new incomes, etc. And so there is a big change in the way that they look at the staffs in the future in terms of the number of people and the level of expertise that they have. So what I'm going to say first is we are looking more to part-time jobs and junior jobs for people that replace senior jobs, now big junior jobs, where people will be trained to become senior over time, but they are certainly paid much less than the previous people in that position. And so they also would look more for consultants for that reason. But there are other things that are more to do with the skills that they are looking for now. There is the economical reason, but there is the skill reason as well. Because of the shift in the work that they do, of course, they are looking more to people who will be able to do online activities, even if museums will not totally become online for the rest of the, it's going to be hybrid models who will have more need for online skills, of people with online skills. But that's one aspect. The other one is people that they hire will have to be more flexible, more all-around people, and less specialized staff. Staff people will have to do more things with less. And so they need to be less specialized and be able to fill in many different places. So they are looking for also people that come outside of the field and that have more managerial experiences than the traditional museum staff they have. And they are also looking towards inviting more social scientists to connect with the community, because there are many changes that have happened inside of the museums. We have mentioned the move to more online programming, but also the reality of the place of the museum in the community, and the idea that the community now is dictating much more what the science center should do and what they should speak about, leads to this concept that we need different type of people to have this connection with the community and really give interpretation to what it is that they are expecting from a science center, to adapt the programming into real tools that are really serving these communities. So, and then a very important part, of course, in the US is being more inclusive in hiring. However, I mentioned the whole Black Lives Movement, and because of that movement, more than 900 museums in the United States have made statements about the inclusiveness and their will to become more inclusive and diverse in their hiring. Although we know that when it comes to the boards, for example, 50% of the boards in the United States are uniquely white people, and that even though they mention, and many directors say that they will act on this issue, we know that only 10% of the museums have so far acted in terms of become more inclusive in terms of the diversity of the people that they want to hire. And we know how important it is to have a staff that really reflects the community. And so even when they act on inclusiveness, the problem that remains is that when you hire new people, are you still listening? Are you listening to them? And are you bringing the voices are you listening to the new ideas that they bring, and do you adapt to that? So there is a need in this change in corporate culture, which is not necessarily understood by everybody. So
yes, this is all very interesting, Mr. Walter. Can we have a quick wrap up?
Here we go. The questions become more, we talk a lot about place in the community, but we are still in a community deficit model, is my point, is that we still think too much of how we can become more interested for the community, but not basing ourselves on what the community actually expects. And so that's one of the main questions that I want to address here, but we can do that in the Q&A maybe. So I'm wrapping up right now.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Actually, it's very interesting, and we will be able to talk more about the job markets later on. And just what actually happened with COVID, there were sudden lockdowns. In our case, it happened overnight. And all the buildings and museums and science centers became out of reach for the public. Yet we had to maintain our reach. So remaining visible and relevant to advance the science capital, like you were talking about. So it is still essential. And most importantly, we needed quick and effective decision-making. So I will pass on to our next speaker, Professor Graham Durand, who will be able to talk about the decision-making to us. And actually, Professor Durand is from Questacon, Australia. He is a longtime friend and collaborator of RGSC with 40 years of experience in science museums and science center sector. And what I like about Professor Durand is that he's one of the principal advocates for global cooperative work regarding science educational activities. Professor Durand, the floor is yours, the virtual floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Bamini, and I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you tonight and tell you a little bit about the experience of Questacon. I'm having problems sharing my slides, but I hope you can hear me because I can tell you the story without the slides. So just let me
try, as you start speaking, we can try to show some of your content.
Yes. Okay. Are the slides there now, or the share button seems to have frozen? But okay. Well, look. Let me tell you the story. So, Questacon has been seriously affected by a series of crises and we've been in a crisis mode for 2 years. And it started with the bushfires in Australia at the end of 2019. And the city was inundated by smoke early in 2019. And then we had a big hailstorm. And then the fire started approaching the city over a period of 2 weeks. Fortunately, it then rained. But then COVID came along. And COVID caused us to go into lockdown in March 2020. And we stayed in lockdown until July of that year. And then we were able to start progressively reopening, but hands-on became hands-off. So we had to open up the centre as a theatre experience. So the whole experience was based around small groups of people coming into the centre, hands-off, but interacting with our science communicators in a walk-through, which was a mission to Mars. Then we were starting to progressively reopen and get more people in the centre, and our outreach programs across Australia were disrupted by the travel restrictions and the lockdown in the different cities. So we had to find different ways of reaching out from the centre using different forms of digital engagement, video conference meetings, and engaging with different audiences in different ways. In the meantime, back in the centre, we were starting to get more and more people in the centre, and then a Delta strain appeared in Australia this year. And we had to go back into close down in August. And we've only just reopened last week, bringing people back into the centre, again in small numbers, with a lot of a cleaning regime, wearing masks, having to sign in, small groups, bookings, all the things that all of our institutions have been faced with. So we've learnt a lot from the different crises, the different types of crises. So smoke is something you have to deal with on the day that caused closure on, we lost 5.5 days because of smoke, that depending on which way the wind blew. The hail damage was a short 15-minute storm that wrecked 45,000 cars in the city and many of the rooftops. And we had to, in fact, we're still dealing with the insurance consequences of that from January 2020. The COVID was different because we didn't know how long it was going to last. We didn't know how we would be coming through COVID, what would be different on the other side of the pandemic. So we went into a scenario planning mode. So the various scenarios saw us coming out quickly with good vaccination early and not much community spreading of COVID. The other scenario, of course, is a long, bumpy road where there's COVID in the community. At the time we were doing this planning, there was no vaccine available. So we didn't know how long it would take. And normally, to produce vaccines, it's a matter of, a couple of years. And it's been a remarkable global effort to get the vaccines done so quickly. And that then, of course, enabled us to consider different approaches to reopening. Of course, you have to get the population vaccinated. And Australia, being a very large island, also had to control its borders. So there was a very tight lockdown on our borders. People couldn't fly out easily. People couldn't come in easily. And that helped with some of the containment. But even then, there were breakouts in the different cities at different times. And of course, the pandemic has now been ongoing in Australia as elsewhere, since February 2020. We're still getting, sporadic outbreaks in some of our cities, and that is because the governments are relaxing the measures, because the vaccination level for over 16-year-olds in Canberra is nearly 100%. For over 12-year-olds, it's 97.4%. So there's a high level of vaccination in the city, but nevertheless, as people travel into the city, they can bring COVID. So we've had to undertake scenario planning to try and predict where we would go. All our existing business plans, which were developed in a fairly stable situation, really were not much use for a rapidly changing dynamic situation of great uncertainty. So you had to recast our business plans. You have to recast our budgets. Our leadership models change. And yet, we were in a position where we were still wanting to serve society, to serve the community, to share the science. So we had to adapt very quickly, find new ways of reaching out to the community. And we did that through the normal digital means that many people have adopted. One thing we learned very early on, that our staff were really important. They'd already, by the time COVID arrived, they'd undergone trauma of bushfires approaching the city. Some of our staff work on the front line as volunteer firefighters. Some were fighting to protect their homes. Some suffered badly from the smoke. Some lost cars and houses in the hail. So they were already suffering a little bit. So caring for our people, we decided early on there are absolutely no redundancies. We would adapt. We would bring people in. We would find tasks for them to do. We were able then to redeploy a lot of our casual staff working for another government agency that was dealing with the grants for the various people who'd been affected by the bushfires. So, and that was a win-win, because our people have very strong interpersonal skills, and that was just the job that was needed to deal with people who'd undergone trauma and were looking for some support from the government. So caring for our people is probably the biggest lesson that we learned. I mean, we are people-based organizations, and that was so important. So understanding what the particular crisis was, stabilizing the situation, scenario planning for a road to recovery, and then learning to navigate a very disruptive future. So planning for recovery required us to understand how COVID was spreading, what state the vaccination levels were in. We needed data, we needed trusted data. So we had to work with the health authorities, we had to work with the other national institutions in Canberra, which is the capital city of Australia. And we had to really make sure that we were relevant and useful to society. And we've learned an awful lot from doing that. And as we go back into the new normal, living with COVID, into the endemic situation, we have changed significantly as an organization. We have changed the way we plan for things, the way we do things, the way we work together. We have learned new ways of reaching out from the center into the communities. And many of the developments we undertook during the height of COVID, there will be a legacy, and we will continue to attract new audiences and reach out more extensively. But at the same time, we recognize that in 2019, before any of the crises, we were going really well. Our hands-on exhibits, our programs, our activities, our outreach was going well. And that core philosophy, our core interactivity is still strong, and people will come back and value that. And they've already started to fill the booking slots. They are coming back. They're hungry for that shared social experience. There isn't a rectangular screen. So we're optimistic that we will be going forward on our road to recovery into 2022, but we will be taking a lot of lessons with us into this new world. So thank you very much for that.
Yes, thank you very much. And we will have the opportunity to talk more about your presentation later on. And for our dear audience, I want to share with you that QuestaCon is one of my favorite science centers. And I advise you to include QuestaCon in your to-go list if you happen to visit Canberra as a tourist. Well, having said that, many large museums and science centers depend on tourism and admission fees to survive. And in an era where large public gatherings are actually discouraged, we have to ask ourselves a fundamental question. So do large museums and science centers need to change their business model? I think Professor Graham talked a little bit about that and probably worked on smaller budgets. We have to think about that. And to probably expand on this, I would invite Dr. Linda Conlon, who will be talking from the International Centre for Life, Newcastle, UK. And she manages an award-winning science centre. And the centre is based on an entrepreneurial model and raises its annual operating cost without public funding and subsidies. So the floor is yours, Dr. Linda. And thank you for joining us.
Okay. Just 1 second. Yes, lovely to see so many names appearing in the chat, old friends, and absolutely, I wish we were there in person. It would be lovely to say hello to people. It's always very strange doing these sorts of Zoom calls, but it's great to see that the chat is already buzzing and bubbling. And I think we're going to look forward to talking to you in the question and answer session. Just a little bit about the Centre for Life before I get started. We are based in the UK, in the north of England, and we have a dual mission. Our mission, like every other science centre, is to engage everyone with science. But we also have a mission to support medical research. Part of our money on an annual basis is directed towards subsidising medical and health research. So we are a little science hub, and you can see from the diagram that the Science Centre is part of something quite unique. And I'm always very reluctant to use the word unique because I think there are so few things that are truly unique, but I'm really proud of the Centre for Life and its entrepreneurial model. We have the University Institute of Genetic Medicine on site, you can see there. We have a fertility clinic, which patients access on a regular basis for help with fertility problems. Also a clinic which helps with genetic conditions. And we have some bars and a nightclub too. And I would love to say that they are part of the concept, a life sciences concept, but I think I would be stretching that somewhat, but they do bring in some welcome income. And off to the left there, you can see an arrow pointing at a car park. So all of that constitutes the money that we need to operate. We do not get public subsidy on a regular basis, so we have to raise all of our own income. 600 people work on site from around 35 nationalities, so I think it warrants the name of international. Like everyone else, in March 2020, the world turned upside down and our income dried up. We were luckier than many because we did still continue to receive money from our tenants on site who were actually paying rent. But of course, the science centre, the car park, the corporate hire, the outdoor events, the cafes, the shop, everything else just stopped abruptly overnight. And this is what it did to income. Not surprisingly, it dropped dramatically. And I suspect every single one of us on the call today could share similar figures showing this nosedive in income. In the UK, the British government did provide a very large sum of money, which is still being distributed in the region of almost £2 billion for stabilisation to help cultural institutes. But the cultural institutes did not include regional contemporary science centres. Why? I really do not know. We tried very hard to lobby for a share of that money. And it was particularly ironic for many of us and really quite bizarre that we had a government which stood up each night to talk to the people and declared that they were following the science. Science was the route to getting out of the pandemic. And yet science centres did not receive any recognition or, perhaps more importantly, any money to help them in their quest. It's really, truly bizarre. I want to talk about a specific example at the Centre for Life, because our response to the pandemic was to turn ourselves into a large vaccination centre. This didn't happen by chance, because we did have an existing strategic relationship with the British National Health Service. And I mentioned earlier that we have 2 NHS National Health Service based clinics on our site. So we knew the National Health Service, we were partners already, and they wanted to have a large city centre venue for vaccinations. And they came to us and asked if we could use our conferencing facilities as one of the first major British vaccination centres. And we were the first in the world, the first science centre in the world to become a large centre. It would be so easy to describe this as a purely transactional relationship. It wasn't. It probably started out like that, in that they wanted a large space. They needed somewhere that was very centrally located. And we are very, very centrally located next to the railway station, buses, underground metro, car parks. We're in a fantastic spot in the centre of the city. But it became so much more than that. We became synonymous with the vaccination programme. When people were talking about getting vaccinated, they didn't really talk about the NHS clinic, they talked about the Centre for Life. And it certainly did an enormous amount to enhance our reputation in the community. The amount of exposure that we got nationally from this was huge. And importantly, we got a lot of money from it. And we are still continuing to get a lot of money, because they occupied the premises in December of last year, and now it's almost December a year later, and they are still there. And it looks as if they will be here until at least the end of March 2022, and possibly into 22-23, because there appears to be an ongoing need for vaccinations as new variants are emerging, and it's going to take us so much longer to get out of this situation, I think, than any of us ever envisaged when we closed down our premises in March 2020. We also, in addition to the large vaccination centre, had a pop-up drop-in vaccination centre. I must admit it looks a little bit confusing saying space zone. You wouldn't think that you were going to drop in there for your vaccination, but this was really to try and encourage young people who were not really coming forward. And so again, the central location was key here. You didn't need to have an appointment, you simply turned up. And so we did a link with the nightclub and the pubs on site, so that before people were actually going into the pubs and the nightclub, they were coming to the pop-up vaccination centre to get jabbed, at the same time as which the large vaccination centre was continuing to operate to an appointment basis. We received huge media exposure. The BBC chose to come to the Centre for Life for its first outside broadcast away from the capital. They wanted to mark the anniversary of the pandemic, and so they brought their television programmes and radio programmes to Newcastle and did a series of programmes from the vaccination centre, from the science centre. And you can see here, the numbers were pretty impressive in terms of how many people watched those programs, how many people tuned in to listen to radio. And this opened up lots of doors for us. As time passed, and at about the 6-7 month mark, we started talking to the NHS about communities that were not coming for vaccinations. We pretty much knew where those communities were. And the Centre for Life sits very, very close to areas of extreme social deprivation, amongst the worst in the country. And although it could have been very easy for those communities to walk 500 metres to the Centre for Life, they weren't going to do that. We had to go to them. And we partnered with the NHS on their mobile buses to go out with them and to talk to communities, to explain the basics of the vaccination. We found that the people who were doing the vaccinations were extremely friendly, very warm, very good at putting people at their ease, but not necessarily terribly good at talking about the science. And this gave us a foot in the door of many new communities. Those relationships then developed to include relationships with local authorities throughout the whole of the Northeast. We started to work with them on the back of the trust that was growing on the vaccination programme. We worked with those local authorities on holiday hunger funds and numerous other projects, which in turn brought people to the centre and also paid for those people to come to the centre. So it was a wonderful example of delivering the mission and at the same time receiving money for the margin, for the income that was needed. From my experience of looking at science centres around the world, we're all the same. We are small, medium, large, but we all do the same things. We all have a critical mass of interactives. We all talk about debates. We have debates about the pandemic, about genetic engineering, about nuclear power, about sustainability, all of the things that are really, really important to society. We have schools programs. We do a degree of outreach. We all do the same things, but we operate in different localities. Graham's just been talking about dealing with the dreadful fires in Australia. So I think it's really, really important that we look at the pandemic through the lens of identifying and responding to our specific local needs, because they differ, they vary. And our need was to try and work with a strategic partner in the National Health Service to not only provide space, but to provide so much more: our energy, our people, our expertise. Graham talked about our people being our greatest asset. They absolutely are. And that's one thing that we've all got in common. We've got passionate, dedicated people. and we need to look at how we deploy those people to meet local needs. And I think that strategic partnerships are key. You can't just bounce into these things without having established trust and without having established those partnerships. And it's never been more important than in these dreadful times to actually work with those partners. So my
Dr. Linda, I'm sorry, I will have to interrupt. I don't want, but I will have to and move to the next speakers. But yes,
that's fine. I had actually stopped, so that was fantastic timing.
Yes, because you have already answered some of the questions that we got from the public already. That's why I let you continue. So speaking about partnerships and collaboration and remaining relevant to society's needs, we'll move to our next speaker, who is the director of the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center. And this business model is actually a parastatal body depending almost entirely on public funding, and we have done what we can to adapt to the education landscape of Mauritius. So I will introduce my director, Dr. Aman Kumar Molu, who will expose some of the initiatives undertaken at the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center. Dr. Molu, please.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone, again. Thank you, Bamini. It was very impressive to hear from, inspiring to hear from our previous speakers. Now, we are from the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center. Our unique is quite special also again to us, as mentioned. Now, we operate under the aegis of the Ministry of Education, Tertiary Education, Science and Technology. So we are purely a government organization. And in this presentation, we'll be a scenario analysis showing you how we did more with less. Now, like you mentioned, can you see my screen here? Yes. Now, like we know in March 2020, what happened? We're all taken aback by the first lockdown due to COVID-19 pandemic. Overnight business was closed. People had to work from home. We had the health hazards in Mauritius. We had to implement new protocol enforced as per the government procedures. But more interestingly, what happened to us as a science center is that technically there was a breach in our routine. Exhibition galleries were closed during a period where we usually get the most number of visitors, and all in-house and outreach activities were cancelled, although some planning have reached very advanced stage, like the National Science Week we used to do in May. So just to tell you about finance, we all talk about revenue and finance in Mauritius. Now in Mauritius, the financial year usually starts in July, and submission usually takes place around February, March. So in that scenario, we were imposed by government to drastically cut budget to ensure only minimum operation. Overall budget was reduced by about 25%. And the budget concerning usually the holding of activities in our center is about 55% of our annual budget. And revenue is only 2% from tickets and rental of venues. That's barely what we have. And just to tell you, this budget for science activities was truncated by 85%. So, and with no revenue forecast and all recruitments put on hold. So then there was a breach in our, with our visitors. Like we all say, people is our business. We have to connect with people, but there was a complete truncated. And this is usually, being a small market, our visits about 40,000 per year. And when we were at standstill, so we didn't know what to do. So we had to, the previous KPI that was set up was no longer valid. So we had to take a decision. And this is where, like we all said, we have to be prompt, to take prompt strategic decision. And what do we do in such scenario? Because we are alone in Mauritius, we don't have the support of many people, so we have to assess the situation. Finance, as I mentioned, was already limited. Human resources, out of the 40 staff we have only 6 scientists, 1 IT officer, and then 4 graphic staff, officers, experts. And technology, like a small science center, we didn't have any new equipment. So we had to ask ourselves questions. Are the staff equipped to work from home? What are the limitations? What are the government restrictions? However, what we can say, as for scientific expertise, we did have the know-how, experience, but we used to have the experience only physical, because we used to do 100% physical, not digital or online. So we were at a crossroad. How do we do to continue business? And of course, we have to find solutions. So what do we do? In that situation, we decided to team up and optimize our resources. And as I said, scientific know-how was already there. We have experienced science communicators and curators at the center, but we were not used to the communication adaptation to the new style. So we have to assess what was available, what's popular in Mauritius, how can we communicate? We do have a media, connectivity was quite good. We explored the digital tools that is popular in Mauritius, for example, Facebook, YouTube, and other platforms. So we tapped into our creativity through a series of brainstorming sessions using number of productivity tools and explored our talents. I did say overexplored. This is we can say that also. But then something we never did before, because we usually work in a casual mode basis with a big assumption that our physical audience always there. So we had to move on again from hands-on to digital interactiveness. We also explored what was happening around us locally, overseas, and where collaborations were possible. Now, then we discovered opportunities for Mauritius, and we worked in this direction. For example, for our exhibitions that were physical in our galleries, we transformed them into standalone traveling exhibitions, of course, with sanitary protocol enforced. Our one team just went there, mounted and dismounted to the schools, or the community took responsibility of the exhibition. After a time period, we returned them back to another venue. And this was a very high demand activity. Some exhibitions were converted into virtual exhibition. That's again the first timer for Mauritius, so we have large access to the public. Now, what we did is some activities that we already had, like you said, like Linda said, we all do the same business. So we had lectures, seminars, workshops, science shows. They're all transformed and adapted to online mode. So it was big pressure on our staff, as I can tell you. So our activities, our flagship business that was already on physically had to be either replaced or some abandoned with valid reasons. We didn't have any choice. Some have been replaced by either online or other modes of communication. And then we had some blended mode activities, or reshaped, like we say. So then what we did, we reinvented and we developed a catalog of new innovative online programs, and totally in-house by our small team. And we came up with a series of products. And being careful that this material is going online, it's the first time we are going. So we had to be very cautious. So we did some very, meticulous methodology was adopted. And with validation at every stage, with feedback mechanism, everything was cross-checked thoroughly so that we ensure that we don't get blamed from the public. And the statistics were monitored and feedbacks obtained. So with this experience, we had some outcomes. For example, at the institutional level, we managed to reinvent ourselves, to maintain our image and bring science to the doorstep of the people. So we could do more with less. As per our staff, we didn't increase the number of staff, but our team was empowered and equipped with new IT skills, a new mindset for activity development and communication, science communication. And for the community, of course, this is our main target, main business. Without the community, we don't exist. So we developed a wide range of products, as I mentioned earlier. But what was interesting for us, a small country, our target audience was almost trebled. And this is a big achievement for us. And to conclude, what I can say is we were able to do more with less. And we had to change our set of KPIs, which I have to be able to convince our new finance minister about this KPI now. And of course, we still have challenges. For example, we would love to have our visitors back, because we want visitors. The Science Center is an idle body. And our challenge is, of course, to connect to those people who don't have these facilities, online facilities. And of course, one important solution like the platform we have today, is to collaborate and partner with like-minded institutions. And I think the minister have to thank Honorable Minister, who is herself a science educator. She is very supportive in all of the endeavors. And we hope that we can go over this storm and bumpy road and again come back to normal business in the very near future. So I will stop here. I hope I'm in time, Bamini, and we can discuss at the end. Thank you.
Yes, actually, I'm picking up the commonalities that I'm finding is going online. And yes, increasing our visibility online is one thing, but then assessing the impact of the program on learning is something different. So I'm just launching some tips for discussion later. And one science center that has completely built a new model of engagement with young people is the Glasgow Science Center. And we will now listen to a story told by Dr. Stefan Breslin, who is the Chief Executive of Glasgow Science Center and also the Chair of the Association of Science and Discovery Centers. And Professor Durand, Dr. Molu talked about passionate staff. And Dr. Stefan is an engineer who works to inspire young people with shared experiences. So, Dr. Stefan, the virtual floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning from Scotland. A very sunny, good morning or good afternoon, a very sunny morning here in Scotland, although it's not to last. We've got a big storm on its way that will bring gale force winds and snow. So we're kind of battening down the hatches, but delighted to be able to join you today. And I'd like to tell you a story of an unexpected success, an unexpected benefit that came out of our struggles with COVID. And I'll share a small video with you at the end. But before I do that, I want to talk more generally about our relationship with schools and how that has developed over the years. And it was something that I was always quite uncomfortable with. When I joined the Glasgow Science Centre, it seemed that the months of May and June were exceptionally busy for school visits. These were the months before the school summer holidays. And I think for an awful lot of schools, they were using us as just another destination. And they had a list of destinations that they would visit as a school summer trip before they broke for the holidays. And that's always been a problem for me, especially when it comes to demonstrating value and impact. We all have a mission to inspire young people and to encourage them into futures that involve science and technology. But it's very difficult to demonstrate that impact, especially when we're placing so much emphasis on a single visit and hoping that that single visit is going to be transformational. So over the years, we have developed relationships with some of our local authority regions. So Scotland is split into 32 areas of local government control. And over the past number of years, we have developed close relationships with our 4 local partners. And what that relationship enables us to do is bring every primary school child into the Science Centre at least once a year, every year of their primary. So it gives us a much wider window of opportunity to influence. And then, of course, COVID hit. Schools couldn't visit, the general public couldn't visit. And I will remember, though, that week in early March, where things really started to develop. In January, February, we were all aware of this thing happening out in China, but we weren't terribly worried. And then the first case of COVID was detected in the UK. And then it all seemed to happen really quickly. The weekend before we closed, we had over 3,000 people into the Science Centre. So it was a very, very busy weekend. And I remember thinking, well, people can't be that worried. But then that following Monday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson went on, he gave a national address, and he advised the general public to stay away from places like us. He didn't close us down, he just told people to stay away, which was probably worse. So I went in the following day, I met with my directors, and we took two decisions. The first decision was to close the place, and the second decision was to go online. The following day, the Wednesday, we closed to the general public. On the Thursday, we broadcast our first digital science show. And then every day of the lockdown from that point, we generated and broadcast new content. The first chunk of it was all filmed within the Science Centre. And then as people had to move home, the content was developed from the people's homes, their living rooms, their kitchens. But we broadcast every day and developed new audiences. And the videos were watched by well over 1 million people from all over the world. And that built our confidence that we could actually do this, not only do it, but do it well and engage with new audiences. So then we started to think about the schools and all of those local authorities that we had that relationship with. How do we service that relationship when we can't bring the kids to the Science Centre? So we created the GSE Learning Lab. And what the GSE Learning Lab is essentially a programme where we create outstanding experiences with science that we deliver digitally over a 10-week period. And as part of those experiences, we involve local experts from local industry and academia to bring that real world context into it. And then the visit to the Science Centre or a visit from us with our outreach teams reinforces that learning. And that is a model that, satisfies all my desires for that extended engagement with young people. And it's been incredibly successful. So we've gone from relationships with 4 local authorities before the pandemic. Now we're working across Scotland, mainly the central Scotland and the south of Scotland, with 17 local authorities. We have had 17,000 young people who have completed a 10-week programme. They have graduated from the Learning Lab. And over the last few weeks, we've just started to welcome some of those school children who have been through the Learning Lab back to the Science Centre. And that visit to the Science Centre is all the more special because we've had all of that time with them in advance of the visit. And I'm delighted to say that yesterday, I managed to secure significant corporate sponsorship, which will allow us to roll this programme out to all of the remaining local authorities in Scotland. It will allow us to take it up to the northeast of Scotland and central Highlands, and we will be working with local delivery partners in those areas, because I think the local context is critical. We can develop the material in Glasgow, but it has to be delivered from a local centre. So I would love to say this was a well thought out programme and the result of long hours of strategic thinking, but it was driven by an energy that was fueled by fear, paranoia, and worry for the future. And it has, as I said, exceeded our expectations. And I'm going to ask Bahami now to show a short video which kind of captures the spirit of the programme.
Dr. Stefan, thank you. Do you want us to play the video
yes,
right
please.
now? I think it will be more illustrative. We'll try to go quickly over the video and then we'll pass on to the next speaker. We will go with Daniel before Mr. Kumar because Daniel got another commitment. So we'll have the video and then next is Daniel.
Hello and welcome to GSE Learning Lab. Elizabeth Mills. I am a PhD researcher at the University of Dundee, and I am both a marine biologist and an engineer.
My name is Heather Reid, and for a long time I was a weather forecaster with the Met Office and the BBC.
About hydroelectric power. Here's some facts. Today we're focusing on wave power.
Thank you, Dr. Stefan. And just to continue on the topic that you raised, when you talked about the lockdown, and then on the next day you were able to go online. So it comes back to the issue of preparedness to face a crisis. And that issue of preparedness is probably not the same and not equal around the world in different parts of the world. So in Africa, it might not have been the same situation. So I will invite Mr. Daniel Mutsapi, who is the chair of SASTEC and been involved at the ArcelorMittal Science Center, to talk a little bit about the landscape in Southern Africa. So Daniel, it's yours.
Thank you very much, Pamini. Well, before I talk about the Southern African context, because I will be touching on the different science centers' response to a survey that SASTEC took out last year, I would first want to tell you about the South African context, which when I look at it, it really translates mostly to what happened in Southern Africa, but not necessarily us alone, but with other countries in Africa. And you would note that we only have names up in the Northern African parts, and we have Southern African SASTEC in Southern Africa. So there's still that abyss between us and northern part. And for most Africans that are here, we would like to have this discussion about bridging that gap, because it's a huge gap, where you find that the eastern part of Africa doesn't have much. So we definitely would wish to have discussions around that. I know that my colleagues at NAMES would have wanted to be here, but there could have been other things that they are busy with, but we are having this conversation about bridging that gap. So let me talk about what happened in South Africa. In South Africa last year, when the World Health Organization declared it a pandemic, the one thing that happened was South Africa tried to be prepared, but being prepared meant that there should be funding and processes in place to ensure that there's that process of being prepared. But when funding is made available to care for COVID-19, there was also a problem of funding being given to science and technology centers. And there's a nice article that was written by a friend of mine that says a butcher's bill. We know about the adage, a butcher's bill, but it was budget cuts that went straight to the South African Science and Technology Ministry. It meant that the budget would be cut by about 20%. But the biggest hit people in this case was science museums and science centers. Walter, I'm on vacation right now. I just did a mini study on one of the museums here in Port Elizabeth, which is called the Bay World. And my wife was asking, what are you doing? I looked at how many people were coming into the museum as we were speaking, and it's not good. But well, there are good pictures. With every problem that everyone encounters, there's always the good part. So back to the budget cuts, the research foundation or the research supporter of science centers had a budget cut of about $5.8 million US, which meant that if a science center used to get some funding, that meant that science center would not get funding. And when we did a research, or that survey, we also found that a lot of centers struggled with regards to the funding. But the good thing is we also found that a lot of centers were people-centered. So with regards to the problems that were encountered by the country, and the support that the country offered to employed people in the country, most of the staff members at science centers were stationed and were kept in science centers. And this was not only for South Africa. Now I'm going into the Southern African region. We found that including the host science center right now, most of the staff, in fact, in most cases, 100% staff was retained. And that was applaudable, because, I mean, if we go to a new normal, you would want to have the knowledgeable people that you always had. But what happened was the survey also outlined what happened with those science centers when they were not able to work at the science centers, because we know our job is, it also entails a whole lot of touching, feeling, and learning from experience. But most science centers went online, and Dr. Derek Fish, I'm not going to touch on what he will be talking about, but he was also a good pioneer to assist the science centers in making sure that most science centers stayed afloat. I mean, even the government was very instrumental in the work that the science centers did. As we presented the results of the survey or the research that we did, they were very helpful. As of this year, we got back to hosting our National Science Week that is normally supported by government, and there was funding that was offered to most of these science centers. So there were the most innovative way that we found working was collaborations. A whole lot of science centers went into collaborations. So basically, if something I cannot offer my normal audience at ArcelorMittal Science Center, I would look at the science center nearby that can actually offer that, or not even nearby, but also science centers in other African countries. So we found that collaborations were the biggest key driver to keeping the work of science communicators going. And with considerations of such, we also see that with the problems that COVID brought to the world, we were also presented with opportunities such as this one that we are having currently as we are speaking. I mean, the international perspectives that we are having right now can actually mean a whole lot for most centers. And as you might be aware, we met with the 5 other sister networks in the world, and those collaborations that we had in 2020 meant a lot for most science centers in Southern Africa, because the participants, which were CEOs, the directors, as they participated there, the information trickled, so they were able to offer advice to their respective centers, and they were able to draw up some knowledge from other centers around the world. And with that, there was also the part where we had to deal with assisting the government in managing the pandemic. How that happened was some science centers actually offered their vehicles to the government say, well, go do the screening and testing for the members of the community. And some scientists, even to this day, they are actually working as COVID centers for vaccinations, which is beautiful, considering that. I'd like to hold it here. So questions can be sent. We will respond to questions. Thank you, Benin.
Yes, thank you. We are again coming back to the relevancy in a time of crisis, like how relevant and useful the Science Center and the science can be to society. Moving from Africa, we are going back. We are going to NCSM, the National Council of Science Museums in India, and represented by Mr. Samarendra Kumar. We know India has been heavily affected by the lockdown and COVID-19. And Mr. Kumar is the director of the National Council of Science Museums headquarters. And he will talk more about outreach activities, like going to the people in his presentation. Mr. Kumar,
good afternoon. Good afternoon to everybody from India time, and good morning to some of the colleagues from other countries. So it is really privilege for me to be part of this esteemed panel, and I'm thankful for this to the friends from RGSTC especially, because we have been involved with the RGSTC setup like that. Let me just share the screen for you. Just to briefly tell about what NCSM is about, I think probably many of you are aware that the National Council of Science Museums is, I think, one of the largest network of science museum centers in the world right now. We have developed over 50 science centers, museums, and science cities, and probably 2 centers in abroad, including the RGSCC and one in Kandy, Sri Lanka. And we provide catalytic support to many institutions, organizations, countries, in terms of exhibits and galleries and facilities. We are presently also working on 12 new science centers, science cities, and probably one is ready and other 3 is ready in March 2022. And we have a very interesting setup called Innovation Hubs for the young children, and we have 38 innovation hubs all across the country. 2 hubs are ready for opening, and we are working for another 12 innovation hubs. Basically, roughly we have this in National Council of Science Museum around 14.6 million, around 15 million people visits every year. And we have a lot of outreach programs, especially the mobile science exhibition program, which is one of the largest in the world right now and continuing for almost now more than 50 years or so. These are some of the activities and programs where we engage people all across, not only students, but a lot of people are involved in our activities, including fairs, expos, and lectures and like that, which is very common to many of the science centers all across the world. We also have this very interesting program of inclusive approach, where we cater to the underprivileged children, some children, children with special needs, especially autism, blind, mentally retarded. We also cater the rural population, reaching the unreached. Sometimes we go to the beaches, housing societies, through mobile vans. We also cater to the senior citizens, housewives, and many more such kind of unreached people we are trying to reach with various kinds of activities. But and I'll just show you, this is one of the most largest extension program of the world, which reaches about 3.5 to 4 million rural students especially. And this is one of our major community reach program, which has been successful more than 56 years now running. These were the challenges faced by the National Council of Science Museum, because immediately when the lockdown started, the facilities were closed, outreach activities were closed, mobile science program was closed, so we are unable to reach the people. Low footfall in the museum resulted in even after opening of the centers, we are facing this problem. The closure of schools, students are one of the major clientele, so we were unable to reach to the students, and students were unable to reach to us. Reduction in public funding, which many science centers have faced, because we are totally funded by Ministry of Culture, Government of India. So there was, because in 1920 and 2021, we had a major cut in our budget for this, especially for the activities. We were paid for the salaries. Severely affected and timelines were shifted. because of this lockdown, we have this internal revenue generation, which takes care of our activities. That was badly affected. The curtailment in engagement of contractual manpower was severely affected because of this. Difficulty faced in maintenance of facilities due to lack of resources, and challenges of shifting to digital media for online activities, because before that we are not so prepared for these activities. And the challenge was how to remain connected with audiences, and also with some legal issues which is there. For example, we have given the rental spaces or the lease period. So we had to face these kind of challenges in all our science centers. You can see that the Science City, one of the largest in the world, in fact, they used to receive about 1.5 billion people every year, but immediately they were starving for the visitors. And Science City is one of the centers in India, in the world, in fact, where they were self-sustaining. They don't get any grant for their operation and management, but due to this COVID effect, they were badly affected and they were unable to reach to the people. This is just a figure that how we accepted and what is the position right now in 2021-22. If you see the month-wise, how they are happening, you can see since April when the lockdown started, and then the 2021, and then in 2022 also. So if you see in 2022, it is slightly gradually picking up, but there is a big gap between the prior 2 years and this current year. So there is a challenge that how to reach to that optimum level to get maximum. So these were the months where the center was almost closed, and for certain period of time in this period, which was from April to June, it was closed, but gradually it is now picking up. So what we did that we again switched on to various online activities, because we felt that unless we are connected with the people, we will not be able to make ourselves relevant. So we did a lot of webinars, panel discussions, popular science lectures, contests, training workshops, and for our audiences which were connected. In fact, we had a big database all over the country. So we had this kind of network that we made a national effort to make every program reachable to all the people across the country. And in fact, we were so happy that many of their participants are from many other countries also. So this is the kind of online activity in 2020-21, if you see the figure immediately, because prior to that, we were not doing any online activity, but in 2020-21 and in this current year, 21-22, we have just started doing much more online activities. And probably that has increased our capability to a great extent. This is especially we focused on COVID communications, because we felt that science centers has to do, they have the social role to play to reach to the community, to tell about the science of this COVID. So and because vaccine hesitancy was a very big problem in our country, so we tried to reach such kind of seminars, webinars, popular talks, and we also organized some competitions, workshops, and training, especially related to COVID. And then we invited a lot of people there, and then we were able to reach to a large section of community through this COVID programs. If you see that, in fact, we lost some of our colleagues during this period, but it was a challenge for all of us to how to get connected and how to do something innovative in our science centers. In fact, one of the science center in Bombay was taken over by the local municipal corporation for making a makeshift hospital. Similarly, in one of the science center in Goa, the local government asked us to make some 3D printed shields. So whatever we did utilize our resources in our innovation hubs where the 3D printers were available. We made such kind of 3D glasses for the medical professionals who were working in at that time in the peak time. So, and we made a lot of sanitizers, dispensers, hand-free, pedal-operated, touch-free, and like that, so that it was given to many of the community people all around, and maybe supplied to some of the institutions also, such kind of thing. And during this time, we also developed a lot of capabilities in terms of this sensor-based touch-free interactive exhibits, which are still in operation, because we thought that when the people will start coming to the center directly, probably they may not be able to use immediately the touch exhibits. So we worked on that also, and all the science centers were ready prior to the opening, because we had done a standard SOP for all over India, how the museums will operate after the COVID also. This is there that we went to the virtual mode. I will not go to the video because we had several lockdowns video, just a small kind of thing, maybe just a second or so. So some of the centers started very interesting programs, like it was called Scientific Lockdown. And then they tried to reach to the local communities with various episodes, various events, various programs, various workshops.
Yes, I see a lot of commonalities between in terms of initiatives undertaken by different science centers, even if we are from different parts of the world.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Just to read that, just very quickly, I'll just close that. This is the kind of online participation in our headquarters and the kind of upload and the reach to the people and the social media presence in one of the centers, but several other centers work for that. So this figure may go to tens of millions in the presence. So thank you very much for this opportunity and sharing our thoughts from India.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar, and thank you, NCSM. Again, it's about the social media presence, which becomes an opportunity during such times. But what do we do if the public doesn't have good internet connectivity? Going live. So what happens? So we will end up with a video from Dr. Fish, who has joined us, but we will show his video. He's from UniZulu Science Center, and just watch the video before we take up the questions. Good.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. Derek Fish from South Africa, and it's my privilege to be part of this international forum. I've been director of the UniZulu Science Center in South Africa for the last 30 years. I want to talk to you about a project we did, which was a paradigm shift which was started by COVID. The UniZulu Science Center is on the southeast coast of South Africa, just below Mozambique. So I think it's the closest of the science centers to Mauritius today. If it's November, it means that your science center is 17 years old. Congratulations. Our science center also started in November and recently turned 35 years old. Now, for about 25 years, we've been working with matric students. Our science center, like most in South Africa, works mainly with school children rather than the general public. Matric is the final year of school, and we've been making presentations to assist these students prepare for these exams. These have been presented to over 200,000 students over the last 25 years in 11 rural locations in northern KwaZulu-Natal. Now, with lockdown in 2020, we realized the students needed help more than ever, but we couldn't get into the schools and they couldn't come to us. So like many science centers, we tried to start making some digital projects. And in fact, we took our 4-hour face-to-face matric workshop. You can see every pupil has a booklet that was printed as well, and we converted it into 8 one-hour videos. When we were ready to implement this, we had a real paradigm shift, and that was caused by this one cartoon, which really struck me, and I hope it'll strike you too. Remember, not all children have the same opportunity, and the realization that the children we work with do not have digital devices, often don't have electricity, and certainly don't have access to good internet where they can stream or download resources. So we determined to carry on with the project. We put all the videos onto memory sticks or thumb drives. We also printed the booklets, and we prepared to send out resources to 180 schools, to 5,000 students in our local district. Now we've done the physics, we've finished a life science or biology course, we're busy with chemistry, and we've committed ourselves to continuing into algebra and geometry. Now, although I always prefer face-to-face, we found that there were many benefits to digital video above face-to-face. Whereas before we were presenting to 5,000 students, now this year they've gone out to over 50,000 students all over the country in small learner groups, short 1-hour sessions, and no extra exposure to COVID, as the pupils can have the resources at their schools. Most importantly, though, and the reason we decided to go offline on memory sticks is that there are no connectivity issues, which are a major problem in rural areas, and no ongoing data costs. And this one particularly is a deal breaker for our rural schools. They don't have money to download long videos, and they certainly don't have good enough internet to stream, and all kinds of other advantages which go with it. Now, the videos are available online at various websites, but we distribute it largely on these memory sticks. And please, if you'd like to contact me on either of these email addresses, I'd be happy to discuss the project with you further. I want to talk about one portal that was used to distribute these videos, and that is the Ineti project. Now, the Ineti project happened in Cape Town on the southwest coast of South Africa in a township called Ocean View. It was centered at Ocean View High School, and it was a wireless network, and this Wi-Fi mesh was used to roll it out to various hotspots around the town and especially around the school. Now, these are the directors, all local people who did all the work themselves. Dr. David Johnson used his Wi-Fi expertise to set this up. Now, this is the splash page you reach when you connect to the network, and the teachers of the school can put all their resources on the page, including a complete Wikipedia download, Khan Academy, TED Talks, and all of my videos. Now, the beauty of this is you don't need the internet to access this, and there are no data costs, and it's super fast for anyone in the Wi-Fi area. And the idea is to roll this out to many other spots in South Africa. Now, this project caught the attention of the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineering and actually won the global first prize for community enablement. One other project, the Golden Futures Project, at the University of Cape Town before lockdown, more able scholars in the sciences would get together with township students and help them with tutoring and assistance with science, mathematics, and so on. Now, again, with lockdown, it wasn't possible to get together. They tried to do it online, but found that, again, data and connectivity difficulties were the major problem for these students. So the decision was made to do this via WhatsApp because that is affordable, familiar, multimedia tutoring can happen, and it's actually preferred by the students. And so when students send a WhatsApp message, a computer program will divert it to the correct tutor, who can then converse, send voice files or pictures to assist them. Now, how does this tie in with my videos? Well, quite often when students asked a question, the tutor would send them one of my videos, which are very small and compact. They'd be able to watch that video and then get back to the tutor if they needed further help. So 3 fantastic projects which have shown that digital content does not necessarily mean online access. I'd love to discuss these further in the question time. Here is my email address. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Derek. Actually, he's with us and he will be typing in the answers if you want to talk to him directly. Actually, I'm very sorry, we went overboard by 5 minutes, and if you agree, we will take 2 questions, I think, which are very important for the field of science centers. One question is from Jan Brussels, directed to Professor Durand. So, if we tend to go too much into technology and the concept of hands-off, so are we not moving away from real interactive exhibits that science centers value so much? So what is the danger?
Yeah, so yes, there is a danger, but experiential learning through play with interactives has been the core of science centers, and that is something that the public value. So I don't think it's a case of either that or digital. We've all learned to develop hybrid models. We recognize the power of digital, and I really loved Derek's work just there, because that opens up a whole range of other possibilities. So in terms of hands-on, in the exhibition setting, you've got to firstly make sure the galleries are safe. You've got to make sure your cleaning regimes are safe, the social distancing is fair, and you increase the ventilation because it's an airborne transmission of the virus is the main vector. So actually touching surfaces is not so important. However, you want to maintain the hygiene. With exhibits, you modify what you can. So for example, the the exhibit BATAC, which is a reaction timer exhibit that has all buttons that people press when they light up. We've been able to change that to proximity detectors, so it becomes a hands-off exhibit. And you can do that with many different exhibits. A lot of ours you can operate with your elbow or your foot rather than your hand, but then you increase sanitizer and make sure that people sanitize before use of exhibits. So it's a matter of training the public, expect them to behave well in the center, and modifying those exhibits that you can. But absolutely, I agree with Ian that the experiential learning remains the heart and core of what we do, and we will find ways to increase that. And although it's possible to have good experiences online, it's not the same as being face-to-face with a bright young science communicator or a good exhibit.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Graham. And another aspect of science centers I've seen is supporting school, and the whole debate about going online. And that was the first thought response, like going online. And my thought was, while we go online and place content for people to view from the other side, whether it is students or the public, are we not moving back to the deficit model of science communication, and we are kind of cutting off the dialogue? So does somebody want to answer that? And then what are the kind of solutions? Probably Dr. Stefan from Glasgow Science Centre.
Yes, thank you, Bahami. I agree with you that there's definitely a danger of that, and also reflecting on Graham's answer about the value of in-person experiences and playing with hands-on interactive exhibits. But for me, it's always been about the people and creating interactivity with people. And at the moment, we're being forced to do that online, but we try as much as we can, not just to broadcast, but to create interactive sessions where the audience, whoever that may be, a community audience or a school audience, can interact with the presenter. But we also create lots of collaborative activity. So when we go offline, the resources that we've left with the young people are all about collaboration. So that we see that collaboration and discussion is an essential part of the learning, and we're trying to encourage that through our programs as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this answer. And I wanted to touch also the aspect of science centers presenting the true science, like the idea of trust was raised, trust in the science when we are swimming in a sea of fake news these days. So probably Linda can talk a little bit about your work on the promotion of not promotion, but on the guarding people about fake news.
Yes, I think it's a very large ecosystem that we operate in, because people can get their news, good news as well as fake news, from numerous sources. And I don't think that today most people think immediately of a science centre as a source of news. I do think that most people regard science centres as trusted places, safe places. We are not neutral places. We do believe in vaccination. We do believe in evolution. We do hold a stance on numerous critical issues. So I think that we can help people to navigate and explore better the issues around science and the choices that people might need to make. So I think in terms of simple, straightforward information, yes, we can do that, but so many other people can do that as well. But I think the issue of trust is critically important. And that it really, in a way, comes back to the issue that we were just talking about, and the digital arena, because digital is a wonderful way to enhance the physical experience of science centres, to enrich and extend, but it's also a tool for building relationships with visitors. Because I think it was Stephen who was saying earlier that it's very, very difficult to measure impact when people come very infrequently to a place. But the digital arena makes it easier to foster and nurture those relationships, because people are not going to turn to science centres unless they have a reason to do so. And that reason has to be firmly rooted in trusting, in having positive memories, in having a relationship with the science centre. So I think it's quite a complicated subject area.
Okay, thank you very much, Linda. And just one last question. We talked a lot about staff, about passionate staff, about willingness of the staff to go overboard. And we have seen also through different presentations, science centers, infrastructure being used as vaccination centers and to support communities. So Mr. Walter, do you see that there are opportunities for new job creations in science centers, where if the COVID is going to be prolonged for a longer time period?
Well, certainly from what I've said earlier, there are, and you have mentioned it, there is more and more the hybrid model where we combine physical visits with online. And so there is probably an emphasis on creating new positions that relate to the creation of these online programs. But on the other hand, I would say certainly in the US, science centers have discovered new audiences that they were not reaching before, and that they are actually trying to reach now. And the reason for that is that the new audiences that they discovered were, as in India has explained, the underserved communities, the Black communities, the Latino communities, who have been the hardest hit by the COVID. And when you open the vaccination to these people, when you go to food banks and when you go outside, like Linda is doing in the communities around her, you discover that there is a whole community out there that you normally do not reach. They do not come to the center, and they really need the science as much as any other people do. And so what we see in the evolution in the types of job is, I say, the online activity, but also what I mentioned, humanities, people that are not necessarily specialists in science, in biology, but sociologists and psychologists who are thinking about how to recreate new relationships with these communities. And that is absolutely a trend that you can see here and in the US, and that will figure out new relationships between the science centers and the communities where they are established, and where it's more important in the future to think what is actually what are the problems that these people face, and how can we actually do something to that, and then think about the science that you can use to do it, but starting from what the concerns of the people are, rather than from what you want to channel to them.
Yes, thank you very much. And I think that we have touched a little bit about different aspects. And if I have to examine, we've got some commonalities across countries in terms of science centers portraying science for society and being a place where society can come to for scientific information, but also for vaccination, a place of trust in science. So the issue of relevance is coming up again and more prominently across all countries. And another aspect is that going online is no longer a kind of something wow or special. It is becoming kind of normal. But there is the need to increase our reach and gather feedback so that we don't run into the danger of just delivering information. So the other end is to pick up feedback and enhance the dialogue between science centers and our audiences. And the infrastructure of science centers, when people are not coming, is being put to use, to good use, as vaccination centers, as places for food distribution and others. So we are working also a lot in collaboration with different institutions, with the ministry, with other science centers, with NHS, etc. And yes, so that was a little bit about the commonalities, but we also recognize the issue of diversity and inclusion, which is important, and the divide between African countries and other developed countries, and the need for others to support countries like Africa, where the budget in terms of not only the budget, but in terms of preparedness, we're not as much prepared as other countries. So collaboration and support and knowledge sharing among science centers is very important. So on this note, I really thank you from the bottom of my heart for being part of our panel today. Thank you to our audience. And we are grateful that we've got attendees from all around the world and some friends as well from South Africa, Japan, and Kenya, UK, India. And yes, we've got one attendee from an aquarium, who is a director of an aquarium in the UK among the participants. So thank you very much. Let me also acknowledge my team over here, the staff of the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center. And we will be sending emails. If you want to contact our panelists later on, we will send the emails to all the participants, and we can continue the discussion. So thank you, Professor Durand. Thank you, Dr. Stefan, Mr. Kumar, Dr. Linda, Dr. Fish, Daniel, and I hope I have not missed anyone. So thank you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you very much for joining us at the Rajiv Gandhi Science Center. I think we can have this similar forums in the future again, and more positive debate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, and have a good day otherwise.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.